All right, so we were discussing about light and how we would cast a shadow of this vertical stick that's here on the floor, all right? And then we would be having a light direction that goes into the light source, and it will go and converge with my shadow direction, creating an invisible plane. This would be like the shadow of my stick. And it will create an invisible plane that can go on like forever, right? So this, let's find like a little selection. This will become my shadow plane that we will use a lot later. But that is what we will be working on mostly. So the principle of finding a point, the top of my stick, bringing it down to the floor directly where it's hitting, and then going into the shadow direction and making it with the light direction, that's all that casting shadow is all about, right? That's the main thing. So, and those lines are independent from your perspective. And we'll see that when we start doing planes or we start doing volumes. But if I, for example, have a second stick over here, right? This is the top of my stick. This is on the ground. And let's say that it's in the same environment as that stick that we have, right? So we talked about not using a local light source, but using the sun as a reference, which means that if this is my light direction for this, then my light direction for this is going to be parallel to that as well, right? And my shadow direction is going to be parallel as well. And I'm going to find the shadow of this stick here, right? So when we were discussing about having 4 sticks, let's say that this is the part of my perspective grid, and I have 1 stick over here, I have a second stick over here, I have a third stick over here, and I have a fourth stick over here. So this gives us kind of like the wireframe of what a box would be, right? But let's imagine there's no box, there's just 4 vertical sticks there, right? So I need to select my light direction, right? How do I know how to select my light direction? How do I know that I want this direction for my light beams, or I want that direction for my light beams? Based on it, but in a way we decide where that is, so we don't have to think about it much. We do it thinking where the drawing is going to be more informative. I can decide that my light source goes somewhere that way, and that I want to project my my lights towards this side, but it feels weird when the shadow is at the front of your object, right? We're traditionally conditioned to think that it is going to be a little bit towards the side. So probably instead of going from the light source down here, we probably would like to think that our light source is somewhere more on this side, so that we can say, okay, so this is my light direction. Actually, let me change color. So my light, hey, I just changed you. Okay, so my light direction is probably going here, going to a light source in that spot. It's going to go here, it's going to go there, and it's going to go here, right? So all these light beams are going towards my sun, that it's really, really far away. Now I need to decide the shadow direction as well, okay? And that is also something that I get to decide. I could say that probably it's going in this direction, or I could say it's going in that direction. That's up to me, but they're going to be parallel lines. So in this case, let's say that I want that. So this would be the shadow of that stick, right? And what I need is, since this is my shadow direction, that's going to be in part of my shadow plane, the other sticks are going to have the same direction. So this is going to be the shadow for that stick, this is going to be the shadow for that stick, and that's going to be the shadow for that stick. Yes?
So, because they're arbitrarily deciding like what direction the shadow goes in, is it just because like the light is the angle out from the picture? Or like, you know, like you have it coming from one direction.
Yeah.
It could be like any direction
Well,
in that circle.
Pretty much, yes. Remember that we're dealing with a 2D representation of a 3D reality, right? So in this case, I'm imagining that the sun is behind me, kind of like towards this side. Well, for you, sorry. Kind of toward this side here, and going down here. It's almost at the side of the object, right? If I decide to still have this direction, but I decide to move the light source that's somewhere there, a little bit towards this side, then perhaps instead of having that direction, actually, let's just go another layer. Let's imagine that it's kind of like a similar light direction, but we're going to move the light source. So I may still have that light source in the same side and have the same kind of like parallel lines. But let's say that looking at this set of sticks, it's, let's say, closer to our eyes as observers than it would be right now. That's kind of like the side of the object. Then in that case, probably I can say maybe the shadow of this sticks could be projected on that direction. So I can do my parallels going there. So that, let me turn off the red. Now the shadow of my object is going far away from me rather than to my side, because we moved that lamp, that sun, a little bit far. You can see that, for example, this is the plane of the shadow. Right? Now, with sticks, it may be a little bit hard to understand. We'll go to planes a little bit. Griffin. They're independent of perspective. They don't need to. Actually encourage them not to do the same thing. Otherwise, they're going to look like part of your construction. And we'll see that in a little bit. Yes?
So the shadow direction, like the bottom of the two lines, that kind of represents where the light source sits on the ground. Right?
Yes. Remember when we had that lamp and you had that inclined light ray that hit the top of the pan? All right? And if we tracked the shadow direction and we did that straight line, it would pretty much end exactly at the bottom of the light source, right? So it's like this would be like really far, and then, whoops. That you could say that this goes to the bottom of the light source, and this goes to the light source, right? So imagine that this stick is in orthographic. And obviously my keyboard just stopped working. So this is our ground, right? This is our stick. And let's say that my light source here. So that my light beam is going to come and hit this and continue to the ground, right? And my shadow direction is going to come all the way here, and it's going to be located exactly at the bottom of that. So depending on how I rotate this point in my 3D perspective is how I would define if my shadow is going in that way, or if it's going this way, or if it's going let's say that I rotated the light source and I put it behind the object. So a third color. Oops. And let's say that now I want my light to be going in that direction. It's going towards the back of my object. Sorry about that. Right? And we can decide the light direction towards whatever we want. Let's say that I want to do that. So now this is the shadow of my object. This is going to be parallel. This is the shadow of my object. That's the shadow of my object, and that's the shadow of my object, right? So check out when I start turning on my layers on and off, and you can see how that light starts looking like it's pointing towards somewhere else, right? It's going to the back, going to the side, to the front. Does it make sense? So what happens when we have our sticks, but they are covered by an extra element? Let's go back to black. All right, let's say that I have this stick in perspective, and somewhere in my space I have a second stick, right? And if we decide to then get a stick here and then another stick here and fill it with molecules, what we get in the end is a plane. Is that correct? So that plane, we're going to imagine that it's made by that stick number 1 and my stick number 2. And then I can start projecting my shadows, casting my shadows with this. So let's imagine that my shadow direction is going to be, let's say, over there. So I'm going to create these two lines. And I'm going to decide my light direction. In this case, it's going to go. I'm going to hit here. And I want another parallel. It's going to hit there. Which means that then from this shadow of this stick and the shadow of that stick, I need to create a line that connects them. Right? So let me pump up the line weight on my plane. If I were to add hatching to this, I have a plane and I'm casting the shadow of that plane on the ground, right? If I decide to move that light source somewhere else, let's say that I decide that this is going to be backlit, I can send this pointing towards my light source, this pointing towards my light source, right? And then I can decide that maybe my shadow direction is going to be going here and this is going to be going there, so that I will be connecting this point and that point. So I can hatch this shadow there. Okay? What if I decide of a third direction and decide that I want I don't know, my light source to be almost above the object rather than a little bit behind? Then my light direction is probably going to be something like this. And then I could decide my shadow direction, which is going to do that, then that. Okay, and then I can add my hatching in that direction. What happens if I decide to not to turn off, but to put that light not on top of the object, but almost in front? Then I can get like a very inclined and elongated shadow, which I don't necessarily want to do because I don't want the shadow to be more important than my object, right? So if I add hatching to that, I have a very elongated shadow projected on the ground. So I can start seeing how the light direction is affecting that plane, right? What happens if I decide to have a permanent set of light direction and I just change the shadow direction? Let's say that I don't want it to coincide with that, so I'm going to do this a little bit different, right? So let's say that's permanent, and we decide to get this light direction and that light direction. So I can get my hatching there. What happens if I decide to change my shadow direction and now I want that to be there? What happens if I decide to change it further and have it be there? And you notice that I'm doing, these lines are parallel as well. Right? What happens is it looks like I'm just moving my light source, right? And that's affecting where my shadow is hitting the ground. Does that make sense? Yeah? What happens, this is the last one before you go into your first exercise, if I decide that one stick is taller than the other stick, and I decide to project my light source at the back of my object, and I find where these things are, well, the shadow is kind of going to look similar to our original drawing, not exactly the same. There we go. Right? What happens if I have a shape that has one stick here, that has a second stick here, and maybe has a third stick here, right? Which would give me a plane that has a different shape. Now I have to project 3 sticks. Is that correct? Right? So send this shadow direction, make it match with my light direction. That is parallel. Oops, sorry. It's this. It's the top of my stick, not the top of my shape. So that my cast shadow would be doing that. In that case, I could hatch that, right? So what I want you guys to do now is to go and in the sheet of paper that I gave you, there's this set of horizontal planes and this set of vertical planes, and I would like you guys to practice projecting, casting the shadows of these planes in different directions so you can experience how to do that. So let's just do all those 7 planes and then we will continue.